This is Design Safe Radio, where natural hazards researchers strive to make our society more resilient to everything nature throws at us.
So, making a hard left turn here.
Oh, no.
towards,
Okay.
more of an existential question to wrap up our time. A hard question that is even hard to ask, but one that needs to be talked about, and you're the right person to talk about it with, is for a young woman entering a typically male-dominated field, do you have any advice for someone who's maybe a few years behind you, things that you've maybe learned the hard way or things that have gone well and like, yeah, you should try it this way? Maybe 5-10 years ago, starting out in your career as an engineering researcher, anything that you would like to pass along to others who may be listening and just starting down that road?
And this, I have to say, is probably the hardest question of the questions that you're asking. And it's one that I actually don't get asked very often. So I'm going to give it my best shot. And there's, of course, like a lot of data and people who actually research this type of thing. And I am not one of them. I can only just say that what my personal experience was.
You're one data point, but a very important data point.
Yes, I'm just one data point. And really, I had a lot of support, and I can actually point to that support as the reason I'm here. And so I actually was a research undergraduate student at the University of Illinois, like my sophomore year of college.
ILL.
Yeah. And so it was like
this was the first thing we bonded over. I'm remembering 5 years ago.
I know, but it was really instrumental, and a lot of those programs, they really try to get a diverse undergraduate student body involved. They flew us to Hawaii to go do a conference, which was really amazing.
That's always helpful.
And actually, I'm giving a talk about this at the NERI Summit next month, but it was. I could point back to that and say, like, well, that's where my interest in structural engineering and natural hazards began. And, being introduced to research at that early age was really instrumental for getting me here. Like, I don't think I would be in academia otherwise. I also had my advisor for my PhD was just phenomenal. He was just a phenomenal person. And he passed away a few years ago, but I remember when we were all gathering and to talk about his life, one of the other women that he was also extremely, he also mentored, was like, no one really knows this, but he was just extremely, like, he was so supportive of women. And I know that sounds like such a strange thing to say, but it's like, I don't think I would have pursued a PhD if he hadn't been as supportive as an advisor during that process. So
what were some of the things he did that made you feel so supported?
I mean, he was just the kindest person. So you'd show up to a meeting, and this is going to make me look terrible, but you'd show up to a meeting totally unprepared. And
I've never been at a meeting ever.
And you're presenting, like, whatever you've been doing for the past 2 weeks or however much time between that and the last meeting. And he was just like, oh, this is so wonderful. Have you thought about this? Or have you thought about that? He was like an idea generator. Mm-hmm. Like, he was always thinking about like the next idea and like how you could stretch your own ideas and be creative. And it's like this work that I knew I hadn't really been perfect on. He was like, oh, it's great. Like you're doing like that positivity was incredibly useful for me, because then you develop this confidence in yourself that, you don't have to be perfect all the time. Yeah. Because one thing I will say, and again, is my personal experience, but as a woman in engineering, I felt like I had to be completely perfect. Like, you could not make any mistakes. Like, you could not fail. Because if I did something even in a small way that wasn't perfect, then, somehow I wouldn't be able to achieve what I wanted to achieve. And I don't think that's a sentiment just to me. I've heard that from others as well. So just having an advisor that was like, oh, you didn't prepare and you dropped the ball, but you're still going to be all right, is extremely important.
That is awesome. And not what I expected to hear either. Oh, okay, no, it's that's great. Good. Like, fostering that growth mindset is huge.
Is extremely important. And I try to do that with my students as well. And it's all about how much you're putting into it and how much passion you're giving something. You don't necessarily have to be perfect along the way. In fact, it's even better if you fail a couple of times.
Yeah, failure is your best teacher.
Yeah, because learning from those experiences. You don't learn a lot
when things go according to plan.
Yes, exactly.
I just really appreciate that. Like, as a dad of 2 daughters, and I'm going to try not cry on camera.
Oh, no.
But, like,
don't make me cry either.
I've got a 6-year-old and an almost 4-year-old, and when my 6-year-old saw a video of the wave flume before we were moving here, she's like, "Do we get to go there, Daddy?"
Yeah.
I was like, "Yes,
yeah.
I'm going to introduce you to Pedro, and it's going to be so great. And I want you to be a coastal engineer someday so I can visit you in Hawaii and call it a business trip."
Yes, goals in life.
Yeah, and it's nice and encouraging for me as a dad to say, I don't have to be perfect either, but if I get, like your advisor, just encouraging her to say, "Hey, you showed up. That's all that's required."
Yeah. And of course, not to say that there's not effort involved or anything like that.
Standards that you met and exceeded, and that's great.
I mean, you have to be passionate, but it's it's something I've learned. Dropping the ball a few times is not going to kill you. In fact, it's, I think, part of life.
Yeah, so. It sounds like it's the way in which you drop the ball and respond to it afterwards.
Yes.
It's all about the mindset of saying, well, I'm not going to fail that way again.
Yes. Yeah.
We'll fail a different way.
Most definitely. And we were actually, so I'm coming from a conference, and yesterday we wrote all the times we failed, and like, I know this is, cool. I mean, as someone else said, it was extremely cathartic. But we write what we failed and like how we noticed it, and then what we'll do to fix it. And I think a mark of like a really great failure is that, you're able to not do it again, or, you recognize when a failure actually means that you're limiting yourself, or it means that, well, I just couldn't do this because I had too many things, but I was able to do this other thing because I dropped the ball this one time.
And it teaches you a lot about research too, because if you're not pushing the envelope, you're not failing.
Yeah.
Like,
exactly.
Rather the other way around. If you're not failing, you're not pushing the envelope.
Well, I understood what you meant.
Yeah. So being exposed to that early on in your career of, hey, this is a good thing, because if you want to get into research, you're going to need to learn how to get through failure a lot, because that's what research is.
Yeah.
Thanks for your courage in sharing that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, like I said, not a question I usually answer, but
that's why I asked.
No, I'm glad that it's a question that's being brought up more and more. I think it's actually really helpful to talk about it. Because I actually really love being a woman in engineering. I think it's like where I was meant to be, and like the more women that we have, I think, and the more, the diversity of engineering as a whole reflects the diversity of this country. I think that ultimately is going to lead to better ideas, more fun, and just more interesting perspectives. So
100%.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you.
For being here in person. Oh my gosh.
Yes, we're in person.
Yeah. So,
really in person, in the lab.
In the lab with your test in the wave basin, and like, this is just the best. So anything else you want to share with folks watching, listening before we head out?
No, I think that was great.
Yeah. Where can people follow along with your research?
I do have a website. I think it's kind of cute. So Simpsoba at wordpress.com. It's like a mashup between.
It's great.
Yeah. But I try to post semi-regularly, but it also does link to my Instagram account for all of the young students who I don't really follow Instagram, but apparently it's the thing to do. So you'll see like all the updates on experiments and things of that nature.
Great. We'll make sure to post notes, links to that in the notes. Words are hard. Thanks again for being here, and looking forward to seeing you again sometime.
Yeah, thanks. This was great.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Design Safe Radio. This show is sponsored by the National Science Foundation, grant number 2129782. You can subscribe to Design Safe Radio on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you find your podcasts. Please leave us a review so that we can improve the show, and also help others find our episodes in iTunes. Thanks for your feedback and support. We really appreciate it. You can find out more about NARI at designsafe-ci.org, on Facebook at Design Safe Radio, or on Twitter at NARI Design Safe.